When we left off, we were talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how this helps to organize the different motives that kind of push us to becoming all of the you that you can be, becoming self-actualized. Maslow himself argued that very, very few people ever reach true self-actualization. He believed that a sign of a person who was self-actualized was that they had a kind of an easy sense of humor about everything. They were capable, lots of different things. But very, very few people ever reach that top part because they usually get stuck somewhere along in the middle. Okay. So that is kind of basically where that's all at. Another thing that we have to kind of think about and take a look at is eating disorders. Eating disorders take our very basic need to eat and completely flip it on its head. There are a couple of very, very, I don't want to say important, but very widespread eating disorders. One of the most common is anorexia. Anorexia nervosa is a dangerous medical condition that can cause severe complications, especially for teens. To begin with, many who suffer from anorexia have cardiovascular problems like an irregular heartbeat and low blood pressure. They also often develop gastrointestinal problems such as chronic constipation and abdominal pain. The reasoning that the chronic constipation happens is that when you stop eating, your body, anytime you eat anything, will hold on to that, that material that you've eaten to get all of the nutrients it can get out of it because it knows that it's not going to get anything for a long time. So if you are a person who practices anorexia kind of regularly, it can lead to some severe abdominal pain because your waste products shouldn't be spending that much time in your intestinal tract. And when they get in there and they stay stuck in there because there's just, your body is clinging to the little lifeline that you're giving it, it can cause some really nasty abdominal cramps. Many young female anorexics suffer from menstrual irregularities. Some, as a result of their extreme dieting behavior, render themselves incapable of being pregnant. In order to carry a baby, you have to be healthy, and this is really unhealthy. And so it's kind of a side effect of the anorexia. Between 5 and 6% of all anorexics die of the disorder. Most of these deaths result from either suicide or cardiovascular episodes like a heart attack. Karen Carpenter was a famous pop singer in the 1970s. She died at the age of 32 from a heart attack that was caused by her anorexia. She was constantly being told that she needed to lose weight, and that wasn't how her body type worked. And so she kind of internalized that and developed this eating disorder to the point where there was a brief period of time where all she would eat was carrots. I'm only going to eat carrots. And that's not great because the beta carotene that's in carrots that makes them orange basically kind of came out to the surface of her skin, and she kind of turned bright orange in addition to looking really unhealthy. So that was a problem. Some psychologists believe that some young women who suffer from anorexia nervosa unconsciously want to avoid becoming an adult woman. They feel more safe and secure as little girls. So restricting their diets severely allows them to avoid full maturity. There are lots of different causes of eating disorders, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but that is one possibility. In the eating disorder bulimia, this involves a ritual known as binge and purge. The binging usually occurs as a response to stress. So you're suddenly something really stressful happens, or you have a depressive episode, or some kind of drop in your self-esteem will lead you to gorge on as many as 20,000 calories at a time. Now, the USDA or the FDA or somebody in charge says that we should have about 2,000 to 2,500 calories a day. So that's eating 10 days worth of food in a single sitting. That's really not healthy. But as soon as the binge is over, the purge begins. And this is bulimics then try to rid themselves of the calories from the binge by vomiting, fasting, using diuretics and laxatives, or other methods. Most of the time, bulimics treat their gorge and purge as a secret private ritual. Like anorexics, bulimics also obsess about their weight. However, unlike anorexics, bulimic people tend to maintain a normal weight. So they look like everything's perfectly fine. Bulimia often begins in late adolescence. Sufferers may alternate between bulimic behavior and strict dieting. Bulimia can cause serious medical complications. For example, constant vomiting can result in eroding of tooth enamel and can also cause cavities. Repeated vomiting also affects the salivary glands and can cause the stomach to ulcerate or even to rupture, which results in death. Bulimia also tends to disrupt the body's electrolyte balance. In addition, constant purging can cause an irregular heartbeat and even cardiac arrest. So these are very, very dangerous disorders. So what turns a person from an eating animal into an animal that basically has a really, really abusive relationship with food? Well, oftentimes society places unrealistic pressures on people to be thin. And for a long time, there was this idea that this only really affected young women. It didn't affect young men. What we are finding is that it is actually affecting young men in a larger and larger way. We are seeing young men being diagnosed with eating disorders in larger and larger numbers because there is also an unrealistic expectation of young men to have six-pack abs and be totally and utterly ripped. And if you're not in that way, well, there's something wrong with you. You're barely a man then. So in the same way that these societal pressures have been affecting young women for a very long time, we're also beginning to see it in young men as well. These pressures can contribute to the development of anorexia and bulimia. According to one study, 50 to 75% of adolescent females are unhappy with their weight and body image. Consequently, dieting among teen girls has become a normative pattern, meaning it's something that kind of is a normal thing. You wouldn't blink when you hear a teenage girl going, "Oh, I'm going to go on a diet." That is a normative pattern now, and we don't think about it. But the reality of the situation is that you probably don't need that. Yeah. The media is constantly bombarding teenage girls and young boys with images of ultra-thin models, actresses, and actors, creating a distorted conception of an ideal body type. The thing that you have to remember about every single picture that you see of a person in a magazine is that those people have been photoshopped. You can take a very normal-looking picture and you can Photoshop it into oblivion, and that person doesn't look the same. I've seen a YouTube video, and I'll see if I can find it to to post into the classroom of they took a normal looking, you know, I'd say she was in her 20s, you know, young woman, and she takes a picture, and then the people who are really good at Photoshop, they go to work and they start completely and totally changing everything about her. And so it's still technically her, but it's such a different image that it's very difficult to, you know, be able to see that person. We're also seeing things like Instagram filters and TikTok filters and Snapchat filters that are distorting people's view of themselves. And it's actually being looked at by psychologists as being extremely damaging to individuals, because how are you supposed to compete with a computer image that gets softened or changed or whatever? And these impossible standards are not, like I said, are not strictly related to just young girls. It is happening to young men as well. Young women, I should say, and young men as well. But as societal pressures to be thin increase, so do the cases of anorexia and bulimia. The body mass index, which measures body fat based on height and weight, which, oh my God, I hate the BMI. I hate it. According to the BMI, I should be 180 pounds, which I would look sick if I were 180 pounds. Am I overweight? Oh, hell yeah. Am I going to do anything about it? Yeah, I probably should. You know, I should be a little bit more active. But am I going to starve myself so that I can get down to 180 pounds? Hell no. Okay, number one, I won't be comfortable. Number two, I don't care. And number three, what the hell difference does it make? It doesn't. Let's move on with our lives. Anyway, according to the BMI, the average BMI of contestants in the Miss America pageant has steadily declined since the 1950s. In addition, more and more winners since 1950 fit medical definitions of thin and undernourished. Statistically, no real gender differences in obesity exist. 27% of women are considered obese and 24% of men. Most weight-based gender differences don't develop until midlife. Eating disorders occur much less commonly among African American and Hispanic women, lending credence to the theory that such disorders develop due to pressures specific to a particular society or culture. I definitely agree with that particular statement. I think that that is something that is accurate to some extent. But again, this is something that is being studied quite a bit. These eating disorders out there in the world. Why did we use the word diet? I don't know. Anyway, so this is, like I said, becoming a more and more normative pattern among all people, and you can kind of see it in images of, you know, idealized images of men being produced today. The difference is that, you know, there's also the dad bod, and that's acceptable, but a mom bod, oh, good Lord, no, that's disgusting. Don't look like you're a mother. That'd be horrible. Ew. Don't remind me of the fact that you've given birth. Ooh. It's a societal double standard, and it really sucks. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that my little girl doesn't do that. Lots of different things. Societal pressures, stress. A lot of people, you know, develop these eating disorders because they use it as a way of coping with stress, because it's something that they have control over. You know, even if it's their secret little thing that they do, but they have control over it. Nobody can tell them, no, I can't do that anymore. There's lots of different causes of it. and I don't know how to fix it. I wish I did. I wish I could just, wave my magic wand and say, poof, there's no more bulimia or anorexia or any of these different eating disorders out there. But it's impossible. All I can say, for those of you who may have an eating disorder or had an eating disorder or whatever, I'll tell you the same thing I tell people who are threatening to kill themselves. Tomorrow needs you. Tomorrow needs you. Okay? So you got to be there for tomorrow. Sorry for the downer. Yeah. But typically it does have to do with control. Having a piece of control because you feel out of control in the rest of your life, in the rest of your situations. It's typically what it is. But it is not healthy. And, if you need help, let me know. We can get you some help. Anyway. The next little bit that we need to talk about is sexual motivation. Now, when we talk about sexual motivating factors, you have to understand that biologically speaking, this is the entire purpose of us being here, is to reproduce, to have children, to pass on our genes, to have, progeny to go on. That's the entire purpose. Whether you want children or not, that fact is still biologically there. And I get the I don't want kids, I don't need kids, I don't like kids. I get all of that. I am not a big fan of small children. Do I love my little girl? Oh my God, she's adorable. Do I want to beat her senseless sometimes? Oh my God, I wanted to beat her senseless yesterday. And every day since the day she was born. At one point in the day, I'm like, if I just beat her senseless, would she shut up? Probably not. Okay, I probably shouldn't do that. But the fact is that I have to go to Stater Brothers and get a bag of sweet Valencia oranges. You hit them all day and it won't leave a bruise. Anyway, of course I would not ever do that. That would be horrible. Anyway, but there is a large amount of our day that is devoted towards sexual thoughts and feelings and motivations to do things one way or another. Finding a mate, attracting that mate to you, doing all of these different things. They're all part of this motivation that pushes us forward. I know a number of people who, if they didn't have to, shower in order to keep their significant other, they wouldn't. They're just dirty people, but they want to keep their significant other. So of course they're going to shower every day, I guess. Okay. That is kind of the where this is all at. According to some psychologists, many animals can revive a dwindling sexual interest by obtaining a new partner. This is something that we call the Coolidge effect, due to a story about former U.S. President Calvin Coolidge. Little background on Calvin Coolidge. The dude was weird. Like, seriously weird. He had a rule in the White House that if the Coolidges were in the room, the help couldn't be in the room. So if unless they were bringing something to them, they had to turn around and immediately leave. So what he liked to do was he liked to hide in rooms in the White House, kind of like behind the curtains. He'd stand there completely stock still and then wait for one of the helpers, the housekeepers and the butlers to come in. They'd look around, make sure he wasn't in there, and they'd start cleaning, and then he'd jump out from behind the curtains. The dude was really, 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 really strange. He liked taking his picture. He liked getting his picture taken with like full Native American headdress, like the feathers. Yeah. And he would, look like he wasn't even doing anything. You just normal picture of him, Indian headdress. Guy was a loon. Anyway, there's a story, and I don't know if it's anachronistic, meaning it didn't actually happen, or if it did actually happen, but there's a story that goes that Mr. and Mrs. Coolidge were visiting a farm. And Mrs. Coolidge was informed that a certain rooster on the farm had sex no less than 20 times a day. And she looked at the farmer and said, "We'll tell that to Mr. Coolidge." When informed of the rooster's feats, Mr. Coolidge asked if the bird had sex with the same hen all 20 times. And the farmer said, "Well, no, the rooster actually has sex with many different chickens. I mean, obviously, it's not just the one." And then Calvin Coolidge replied, "Tell that to Mrs. Coolidge." Yeah, dude's weird. Yeah. Now, if this is true, it totally matches Calvin Coolidge's personality. If this is something that was made up, they did a really good job of picking the right guy. Because if they had said it was Herbert Hoover or Chester A. Arthur, I'd go, that doesn't sound like them. But Coolidge, that sounds like this guy. So if we look at the Coolidge effect, okay, from an evolutionary point of view, the Coolidge effect makes sense because males want to maximize their reproductive success by having as many female partners as is possible. Does the Coolidge effect apply to human beings? Well, according to one study done by that bus guy from the one that we talked about on Tuesday, college-age men indicated that they would ideally like to have 18 sexual partners in their lives. Okay. In the same study, college women reported that 4 or 5 partners would be ideal. So if we're looking at that, the Coolidge effect is staring us in the face, and we are at the same evolutionary level as all of the rest of the animals out there. Okay. Evolutionary psychologists would also argue that monogamy doesn't make any sense, which is why we should start doing away with, monogamy and marriage and all this other kind of stuff. Okay. But there are animals out there that do mate for life, like penguins and beluga whales. I don't know. There's another one out there. People differ significantly in what they consider to be attractive in a partner. People usually base their selection of a mate on things that they've learned or experiences that they've had. This is very, very true. And we will take a look at this probably next week, probably on Wednesday. I got to try to get this sorted out and finished so that it can go really quick for a Wednesday. But I'd like to take a look at people out there for you type of a thing. We'll do that on Wednesday. So it'll match up with what we're talking about right now. It'll make sense. Psychologists recognize that more than just physical attraction factors into mate selection. A potential partner's personality, level of competence, and values can also influence sexual interest. A number of psychological studies suggest that men and women want very different things in a mate. Men appear to be motivated by a desire for physical gratification, while women seem to be motivated by a desire to express love and emotional commitment. Now, we talked a little bit about that earlier on on Monday. So just kind of understand that we're still talking about the same kind of a thing. The desire for a potential partner is not the only external stimulation that can awaken sexual interest. For example, erotic material can create sexual motivation as well. Pornography is not something new. As a matter of fact, it has existed since the time of the ancient Greeks. The word pornography actually comes from the ancient Greek words pornos and graphos, which translated literally means dirty words. Men and women respond differently to sexually explicit material. Women are much more likely to dislike pornographic material. This may be due to the fact that in many pornographic films, women are objectified and or degraded. So not something that most people want to see. How much impact does pornography have on actual sexual desire? Well, psychologists have found that sexual desire will remain elevated for a few hours after exposure to pornographic materials. Some psychological studies have suggested a link between pornography and sex crimes. Other studies have found no such correlation. Some studies have yielded results that suggest that a sex crimes pornography link, if it does exist, may be the result of cultural influences. For example, there is very, very little pornography in the country of India. As a matter of fact, it's illegal to show two people kissing. Okay, you cannot show two people kissing on screen. That is considered pornographic. If you've ever watched a Bollywood movie, one of those big dance numbers, they do everything but kiss. And when they do go into kiss, it quickly scans away from them, or, curtains close and you can't see anything. Okay, that is because, again, in India, pornography is illegal, and that is considered pornography. Meanwhile, in Japan, pornography is everywhere. You could buy it in vending machines on the street. Okay, it's literally everywhere. Now, if there is a link between sex crimes and pornography exposure, then India should have very low levels of sex crimes, and Japan should be very, very high. It's in fact the opposite. Sex crimes in India, like rape and sexual assault, are off the charts. But in Japan, they're extremely low. It's not something that is either reported. Yeah, they have vending machines for everything in Japan. They have very, very low. Either it's not reported or it's just not happening. So one of the two of those things is going on. So you kind of have to think about where those things are. Now, is it cultural for Japan not to do that? Yeah, that's kind of the way their entire society is built. That's just wrong, and you don't do that. Is it acceptable in India? Up until very recently, I don't want to say it was, but it kind of was. It has gone down, and there is, I don't want to say a Me Too movement coming out in India, but it is becoming larger and larger as people who are being abused, raped, assaulted, etc. They are coming forward more and more easily. Not that long ago, if you came out and said I was raped by someone, you would be shunned by your family because, oh God, you can't have done that. I was the victim. Yeah, but you did it. So, it was you. So things are changing in India, which is, fantastic for the women of India. Trying to understand sexual orientation is a formidable task for psychologists. We discussed this when we talked about development back in, was it November? God, seems like it was so long ago. Of course, that happens when it's the 363rd of March. It is almost the 365th of March. That's on Saturday. As far as I'm concerned, March hasn't stopped from last year. We didn't have any other months because I've been locked inside this little room. Anyway, sexual orientation is defined as a person's preference for emotional and sexual relationships with individuals of the same sex, opposite sex, or either sex, or none, as we talked about. Sex is not something that has been thoroughly studied by psychologists or biologists, for that matter. Excuse me. However, back in the 1940s, An obscure biology professor at Indiana University was shocked by the lack of scientific literature about sex and the misinformation that is spread by doctors and ministers with regards to sex. This person, his name is Dr. Alfred Kinsey. Kinsey is going to open a center for sexual research at the Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. And it is going to be extremely controversial. In 1948, he published a book which was considered to be groundbreaking at the time, called Sexual Behavior in the Human Male. In it, Kinsey basically talked about all of the sexual behaviors of the males that he talked to. And he interviewed people and kept very careful notes and basically walked through their entire sexual history. It was meant for an academic audience, so it was like a textbook, but it became a national bestseller because people were dying to know, is this normal? Because there was no internet at the time to go, yeah, other people are into this too. Everybody had to read that book in order to go, okay, so that's a normal thing that people do. Okay, I feel a lot better now. Honey, come here. Kinsey conducted a large-scale survey and found that many people who defined themselves as heterosexual had homosexual experiences before and vice versa. Based on these results, he felt it made more sense to view homosexuality and heterosexuality as endpoints on a continuum. And he devised a 7-point scale to characterize sexual orientation. Because of prejudicial attitudes and confusion about personal sexual orientation, it's hard to tell exactly what percentage of the U.S. population is gay. Estimates have varied from 4 to 17%. But people believe that about 10% is probably a good number to kind of settle on. And the reasoning for that is up until extremely recently, you didn't walk up to somebody and say, hey, are you gay? Because if you were, you probably would say, no, because there would be large amounts of discrimination. You might be killed or beaten, or, all kinds of bad things could have happened to you. So it wasn't an answer that many people were very truthful about. Kinsey would eventually write a companion book to Sexuality in the Human Male. And I don't want to say that that's a good idea, but it's a good idea. Especially when you don't know what people's reactions are going to be. And that sucks. I don't like that. But I can only control myself and teach my daughter the right way of doing things. So sorry. But yeah. But he wrote a companion book called Human Sexuality in the Human Female, which also became a national bestseller because people, again, didn't know if this was a normal thing. Okay. But yeah, the amount of disinformation that was out there was absolutely astonishing. There were doctors telling their patients that you can't get pregnant if you are, if you're not married, because what happens is when you're not married, your body will just shut it down, and you won't be able to get pregnant once you do get married. So it's better if you don't have sex before you're married. And it's like, how does your body know? I mean, is there like a pressure point on your ring finger and, oh, it's pressed. Okay, I can get pregnant. They were just making stuff up. It was pretty crazy. This was actually put into a movie starring Liam Neeson. It's called Kinsey. It's an interesting story. I don't know if I would recommend the movie, but it was, it was okay. But it was basically kind of his life and his, pushing the boundaries of people's understanding of, human sexual relations. So it is kind of an interesting story. And that's Kinsey right there. The last thing that we need to talk about is the differences between being intrinsically motivated versus being extrinsically motivated. When we talk about motivational theories, we often talk about things kind of interchangeably. But in one theory, there is a distinct line drawn between things that come from within you and external things that are there towards you. There are things that you, as an individual, like to do. And because you like doing those things, you don't need somebody to motivate you to do them. You just don't need that. That's not a thing. However, there are things that you don't want to do that you do need that external motivation with which to do. For example, many of you don't want to take a test. Well, if I make it part of your grade and whether or not you actually graduate, well, now you're going to take the test because, oh my God, I gotta pass this test. If you are doing things because you just want to do them, that is being intrinsically motivated. Extrinsic motivation is where somebody has to give you an external reward or a punishment for those things. For example, I am extrinsically motivated to show up here every day and try to teach. Why? Because they pay me. If they did not pay me, I would stop doing this. Okay? So that is an external reward for doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's the only thing that's going to keep me from continuing to do this. Otherwise, I got to find something else to do because, I like to eat. I mean, I could, not eat for a month and probably be okay, but, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get down to that sickly 180 pounds. That'd be gross. So being intrinsically motivated to do things versus extrinsically motivated, some people think that you should always be intrinsically motivated to do things. And if I have to extrinsically motivate you, then I've lost. And you're it's really, really frustrating because extrinsic motivators work just as well as intrinsic ones, and it doesn't matter if it's intrinsic or extrinsic. And I'm not going to be able to get you to be intrinsically motivated to study geometry for the rest of your life. But there are people out there who are like, well, I'm not going to extrinsically motivate these students. They have to be intrinsically motivated to learn. Get your nose out of the air and just do it. Stupid idiots. Anyway. So, yeah, intrinsic reward or intrinsic motivation, you don't expect anything to happen to you. You just do it because you want to do it. Extrinsic, you do it for that extrinsic motivation, the money or the whatever. Okay. Do we have any questions about motivating factors, including eating disorders, to a much lesser extent, sexual motivation, all that kind of stuff? Is there anything that you have questions about that I can quickly answer?